Welcome back to Revenue Margin, brought to you by Rob Malenik. I want to talk a little bit about the big, beautiful bill that was passed by Congress and signed by President Trump. There was actually 7 changes that occurred. There are ultimately some adjustments that affected the marketplace in our ecosystem effectively across the United States and nationwide. So overall, these 7 items, number one was tax code changes. There was a lower corporate tax rate. There was additional R&D tax credits implemented, and then also corporate gains and depreciation rules carried interest rate changes that have caused ultimately a really changes to bottom line profitability for certain organizations, tax planning changes, and it's affecting M&A valuations across the United States. Number two is infrastructure spending and workforce spending. So this is really affecting the construction field, energy, transportation. It created opportunities for hiring and training opportunities. It created federal funds for broadband, roads, clean energy, workforce development, grants for reskilling workers, especially with this advanced manufacturing, AI, and green tech going into implementation nationwide. Really, it's happening worldwide at the moment. And so I think there's a lot of benefits for those specific areas. It did adjust some incentives and change up our methodologies. So there was incentives for clean energy adoption, but they're also pulling back on some clean energy construction. There were carbon reduction mandates or credits for emissions, along with tax rebates for energy efficient improvements in buildings. There was also items around healthcare and benefits. So number four was around specifically small business subsidies for credits for healthcare coverages, expansion of some Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements. But there was also reductions in benefit costs and reductions in the ability to provide some services as mandates to greater groups of individuals. So there's pullbacks and some additional cost. Labor and employment provisions, so adjustments to wage mandates, overtime rules, or independent contract classifications. There's direct impact on labor models and workforce classifications. So greater incentivize companies to bring onshoring of jobs and started to penalize offshoring in specific sectors that are affecting national security. Number six was supply chain resilience. So funding for domestic semiconductor and critical materials productions. I think this is really impacting procurement strategies and reshoring investment in the United States. It was trying to reduce dependence on China and this expansion of strategic reserves and procurement preferences for U.S. firms in U.S. nationwide production and supply. And lastly, there was capital access and lending changes. So creation of a new small business lending programs, really affecting the ability for small businesses to find financing in a good way. Government-backed startup and innovation funds and community reinvestment obligations for banks. So there's a lot of additional small business funds that are available for people that to invest and to potentially buy small businesses in their local markets. Ultimately, there was negative impacts for a lot of what I just stated, though, too, because it increased some of these items, but there's negative impacts and downflow impacts associated with some of the things that were pulled back in the legislation also. It's still to be seen what the impact is going to be. I think it needs to be looked at it from a company by company perspective and how it affects your individual organization. But I believe that maybe long term there is benefits to local small business Main Street America. It's still to be determined if this is going to have an increased cost for the United States, or if, and there's also risk, and there's a belief of risk of increased inflation potentially associated with higher costs having to be done in the United States now for the production because it's more expensive to actually produce this internationally. It's kind of a mixed bag, and I believe that that's what ultimately that we're able to provide value for, is that understanding what that strategy is. If your company is negatively affected, how to be able to adjust your individual strategy or potentially pull back on expenses, be able to think about how to find solutions to be able to maintain your business or wind it down. And then in addition to that, if you're one of the benefit organizations that gain from this, how to be able to expand, how to be able to get in touch with some of these programs and funding resources, how to be able to take advantage of the reshoring investment occurring in the United States. Love to talk to you more. Thank you for your time today, and appreciate you turning into Revenue Margin, brought to you by Rob Malenik. See you on the next podcast.